Church, man, I'm so excited that you tuned in today. Listen, it is going to be an amazing Sunday. And whether you're joining us on Church Online or whether it's Facebook or YouTube, I just want to tell you that we are so glad that you're here. Of course, by now, you're already sharing the starting a watch party and sharing the links and subscribing to our channels. I really hope so. But here's the deal. There's a lot of information coming up here in the next couple of weeks, and you being a part of our family and staying connected is really important to us. So would you do a favor? Please make sure you're following us on all our social media platforms, from Twitter to Facebook to Instagram. It's all Engaged Church. Make sure you're actually paying attention to the emails that go out if you're subscribed to them. If you're not, please make sure you go online at engagechurch.org and subscribe to the emails, because we've got major announcements and major things happening. It's going to be great. And here's why I'm so excited, because I'm going to be in the same room with you. I promise you it's going to be great. We're doing everything we can to make sure it's safe, to make sure it's spacious, to make sure it's secure, but to also make sure it's sanitized, and finally, of course, spectacular. It's going to be great. We're going to still be doing these Sunday experiences online, but soon and very soon, we're going to be doing a midweek Wednesday night service. And you have to register to come, and you have to figure out how you're going to come and when you're going to come and where you're going to go. I mean, all of that, I know all of that is going through your mind. And we're going to answer all of those questions. That's why it's so important to be following us and being engaged with us in the weeks to come. Big announcements coming. A big sermon series is coming called Me and Mine. I can't wait. But for now, we have an amazing message here for you today. And if you've been enjoying these, if you're like, man, I love what Engage is doing in the community. Just recently, we just wrote a check to an organization that's going to feed over 1,000 families in Waldorf. How awesome is that? That's because of your generosity. And if you're enjoying what we're doing in our community, you're enjoying this programming, could you do us a favor? Would you consider partnering with us? It'll be absolutely incredible. And we made that simple. Just text. Yes, text. Come on, everything's cashless now, right? So just text 240-434-0761 the number at the bottom of the screen. And we want to make sure that you can partner with us today. And I really hope you enjoy today's message. Hey, Engaged Church. Man, what a time to be alive. And I mean that, right? I truly believe this, that when this year, 2020, is all said and done, we will say this was one of the most significant years of our lives. And the thing about significance is that oftentimes you don't realize how significant something is until that moment has passed, or when you look back at it and you say, man, that was a defining moment. Man, that moment was incredible. And it's very rare that we recognize the significance of something while it's happening. I want to tell you that I truly believe that this year, 2020, is going to be one of the most significant years of your life. I believe that when you look back at this year in 2020, you'll say, man, we survived a global pandemic. I think you'll look back and say, man, look at what our generation, and whether you're a millennial, Generation Z, whatever it is, like, look at what we did in this season to take a stand against racial injustice, to take a stance for equality amongst all people. I believe that this year is going to be a significant year. But personally, over the last 3 weeks, I've cried, I've been frustrated, I've been extremely angry, I've had hope, I felt like I've had hope loss. It's just a gambit of emotions. I feel like I've been on this emotional roller coaster. I've asked the question why over and over again. I'll be honest with you, and I told you this last week, that I don't believe God's afraid of our questions. I believe he welcomes our questions. I believe that he says, man, ask me and I want to tell you. He says, I preached not too long ago, seek and you shall find. So I believe that God is open to our questions. I began to ask him questions like, how in the world, God, could you allow a people group to, quite frankly, be terrorized? Like, how does this happen? Like, what's going on? Have you ever felt that way? Are you asking maybe some of the same questions? I know for me, as I begin to think more about those questions and I begin to think about where we are in our current cultural climate, here's something that's really come alive to me as well. What a time to be alive as a believer. What a time to be alive as a follower of Jesus. Let me tell you something. The world is inconsistent. As a matter of fact, I've been saying this quite often, that I don't know if we're going back for normal. I'm not even interested in looking for normal. I'm just looking for consistency. When are we going to get to a point where things are just consistent? But in the middle of an inconsistent world, we have the ability to portray and to show that we serve a consistent God. I think, man, when I think about what a time to be alive as a believer, like these are the years where the odds are stacked against us as believers, where the odds are stacked against us as a culture, as a race, as a society. Like these are the moments where God steps in and shows out. When the world gets darker, it's when Christians shine brighter. And here's what I'll tell you, and I mean this beyond a shadow of a doubt. Because we are called to shine brighter, what that tells me more than anything else is that it's our duty, it's our obligation, it's our honor and our privilege to speak out and speak against racism, bigotry, segregation, injustice. It's our job to do that. It's our job as believers to choose faith over fear, to choose peace over panic, to choose worship over worry, because following Jesus was never about convenience. Following Jesus was never about comfortability. Following Jesus is about speaking up on stuff that might make you feel uncomfortable, that might make you feel like this is an inconvenience to say this at this moment, but I have to do what I've been obligated to do. And here's what I truly believe. It's the church's obligation to speak up in this time. So today's message is called The What May Be a Who. The what may be a who. And so I want to read John chapter 4, verse number 1 in the NIV. It says this: Now Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John. Although in fact, it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. So he being Jesus, left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. And here's a defining verse, John 4:4. Now he had to go through Samaria. He had to go through Samaria. You see, John 4:4 for me is one of the most overlooked passages in scripture, that he had to go through Samaria. And a couple of things happened while he was in Samaria. Here's the first thing. He told the disciples, because I don't have time to read all of John 4 for you. I encourage you to read it, but he tells the disciples that I need you to go and get some food. And I'm not going to go with you, but I need you to go and get some food. And while he goes to get food, Jesus meets with this woman at the well who is a desperate housewife at best. She is out there. She's far. He's a Jew. She's a Samaritan. She's not even liked by her own people. And this is where he decides to set the setting of what we're getting ready to talk about right now. And here's the question I have to ask you. What have you been avoiding? Have you been avoiding things that are painful? Do you do it on the regular? Because I believe that as humans, we're given to avoiding pain. In fact, you might have heard this saying before. Many of us have. If you haven't heard it, I would wonder kind of where you've been. But it says, no pain, no what? Gain. No pain, no gain. I heard this quote the other day. I thought it was hilarious. It said, no pain, no pain. As to say, let's just avoid pain altogether. But in a weird way, I believe 2020 is about facing pain head on. In a weird way, I feel like God has strategically assigned this year to say, whatever it is that you've been avoiding, I'm going to put right in your lap. Oh, are you tired of being around your spouse? You got issues you got to work out. You feel like you guys aren't on the same page. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stick you in the house together for 3 months. Work it out. Oh, you don't spend enough time with your kids. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put you and your kids in the house together. And guess what? You're going to teach them how to homeschool too for 3 months. Oh, you don't like talking about racism and bigotry and injustice. Watch this. You see, this year is about taking pain and facing it head on. You see, this year is about addressing those things that you would otherwise avoid. And you don't have to make this about racism or bigotry or anything like that. Let's just talk about your life. What conversations have you been avoiding? What in your relationship have you been avoiding? Have you just said, you know what, I just rather not go there? No, let's take it deeper than that. What deep personal internal conflicts in your own life have you been avoiding? What have you been avoiding? Because here's what I know. If we develop a lifestyle of avoiding pain, then how much can we truly grow? If we develop a lifestyle of avoiding pain, if our nation develops a lifestyle of avoiding pain, how much can our nation grow? If the church develops a lifestyle of avoiding pain, then how much can we truly grow? And so here's my prayer for you, that while we're facing challenging times, that while we face challenging seasons, while we may encounter painful moments, that as a church, that as a person, you learn to lean in and not lean back. Why, Pastor B? Why would you tell me to lean in? Well, because what you neglect to address will always remain. What you neglect to address will always remain. That's why even in times like this, during this crazy moments, right, that our culture is in, that our society is in, this racism, that's why we have to call it out. That's why we have to speak about it. That's why we have to lift our voice, because if we don't address it, it will remain. And so here's the question that I'm asking you today. It's just one main question, and by now you probably already know what it is. What have you been avoiding? What have you been avoiding? And remember, sometimes the what is a who. You see, in this particular passage, in John chapter number 4, it's amazing to me that Jesus says we have to go through Samaria. And if you're unfamiliar about the Jews and the Samaritans, then this probably doesn't stick out to you. But what you need to know is that in this particular passage, there's an entire people group, an entire region that's being avoided. The Samaritans are being avoided. The geographical region is Samaria, and it's being avoided. And it's because Jews do not like Samaritans. In fact, the racial tensions between the Jews and the Samaritans was thick, because Jews saw Samaritans as half-breeds. Jews saw Samaritans as less than. Anytime a Jew would encounter a Samaritan, that Jew would think that their life was better than theirs. Every time that Jew encountered a Samaritan, the Jew would think that I'm more valuable, I'm more precious, I have more rights, and I don't want anything to do with you. The racial thickness between Jews and Samaritans, it was huge. Jews wanted nothing to do with Samaritans, and by that, because of the treatment that these Samaritans were getting from the Jews, it created this disdain and a bad taste in their mouth towards Jews, so they wanted nothing to do with each other, simply because the Jews didn't like the Samaritans. And in this passage, and in this moment, here's what happens. Jesus says we have to go to Samaria. We have to go through Samaria. And he's saying this because he's looking at the 12 disciples and he's saying, we're getting ready to leave Judea and we're going to go to Galilee. And the direct route from Judea to Galilee was a 70-mile journey straight through Samaria. But if you were Jew, you wouldn't take that route. Instead, you would almost double your trip. You would go 123 miles all the way around Samaria just to get to Judea, because there was an entire people group that you wanted nothing to do with. And Jesus looks at these 12 Jewish boys and he says, hey, no. We have to go through Samaria. Now, I just told you, they didn't necessarily have to go through Samaria. They could have went around. But I think Jesus, in his infinite wisdom, Jesus, in his infinite knowledge, knew, no, there was something that these 12 boys had to experience and had to encounter, especially if these were going to be his representation in the earth once he's gone. No, they got to go to places that they would otherwise avoid. No, they got to go and see and encounter and experience something here. And he tells them, I need you to go find food, and then you're going to go without me. Can you imagine their faces? Can you imagine the faces of these 12 young Jewish boys as Jesus explains to them, you got to go to a place that you've been taught to avoid your entire life. You got to go to a place that you've been taught, hey, these people group you have nothing to do with. And yet Jesus says, no, actually, we're going to deal with them today. And you're going to go get food and you're going to go get it without me. Could you imagine like Peter's response? That's what I'm thinking about as I'm reading this. Peter's like, food? Jesus, we don't need no food. It's only 70 miles. I mean, we don't got to get food right now. No, we ain't got to do that. You want me to ask these people? How offensive would that be? For food? No, I'm good. Can you imagine what that journey must have been? Like, think about, here you are as these 12 Jewish boys who have been the majority their entire lives, now going to a place where they got to be the minority. And they got to go ask of all things for food from people that they've been taught to avoid, and probably people who don't like them. Can you imagine? Hey, can I have some food? Nah, we ain't got no food for you. Hey, can we get some food, please? Nah, man, we ain't got no food here. Hey, y'all guys open? I'm just trying to get some food. Nah, we closed. But the sign says open. Okay, let me help you out. We're closed to you. Nah, we can't. Like, this was probably a frustrating, tiring, and an eye-opening experience for these 12 young Jewish boys. And here's what's interesting. Jesus said they had to experience it. Jesus said, no, we have to go through Samaria. Here's what I know. I believe that when we begin to look at our country, when we begin to look at the state of our church, the state of our families, if you turn on any news channel right now, I believe our nation, our globe, is crying out, asking one simple question. Do Black lives matter? It's reverberating throughout this entire world. Do Black lives matter? And here's the easy way to answer that. Here's the cop-out. Well, what does Jesus have to say about it? Yeah, that's a cop-out. I think the deeper question is this, the question that lies beneath the surface. Because I know what Jesus has to say about it. The question really is, what do you have to say about it? Because for Jesus, it's a simple answer. It's a resounding yes. Black lives matter. What do you have to say? Now remember, I said the main question throughout today is, what have you been avoiding? And maybe the what is a who. What have you been avoiding? Who have you been avoiding? And okay, let's not just make this about racism and segregation. Okay. What conversations have you been avoiding? What deep-rooted personal stuff have you been avoiding? How long are you going to keep guilty eating? How long are you going to keep comfort eating? How long are you going to stay in worry and fear and doubt? How long are you going to run away from problems that are surfacing in your life over and over and over again? How about this? Maybe the who that you've been avoiding is you. Maybe you don't want to look yourself in the mirror. Maybe you don't like sitting still long enough because you have to face your music. What have you been avoiding? Who have you been avoiding? Because here's what I found. If you follow Jesus long enough, he will eventually lead you to the thing you've been trying to avoid your entire life. He will eventually lead you to a place where you have to face pain head on. Can I tell you what I truly believe? I believe Jesus in a way that we didn't see coming, has led America to face racism head on, has led the church to have conversations about racism, bigotry, and injustice head on. Because if you follow Jesus long enough, he will take you straight through Samaria. Welcome. Welcome here. So what have you been avoiding? Who have you been avoiding? Because we pick up at verse 27, and it says, just then his disciples returned. Where they returned from, they went to go find food. And look at this, they were surprised. This surprised is shocked to find him talking with the woman. But no one asked, what do you want? Or why were you talking to her? Because they were chicken, they were afraid. Verse 28 says, then leaving her jar of water, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, come, see a man who told me everything I did. Could this be the Messiah? And they came to a town and made their way towards him. Okay, here's what happens. Jesus gets into a theological debate with this woman about the Messiah, about worship. And he's saying, I am he, I am the one. And here's what happened. The disciples are returning back from their journey, and a bad situation just gets worse. Because you got to understand, it was rough for them out there trying to find food. And you can know, like, they were ready to talk to Jesus about their experience of what it was like to get food. Oh, man, what it was like to get food. And here's what happens. I'm sorry, y'all, forgive me. But here's what happens is they're getting ready to talk to Jesus about what it was like to get food, and they're frustrated, they're angry, they're upset, and they come straight to Jesus. And when they're getting ready to come to him, they see him talking to a woman who's not even popular amongst her own people, but this is their Jewish rabbi talking to this Samaritan woman, and they're upset. And they're like, wait a second, what is going on here? What's happening? And as they take each step closer, what they're having to do is walk towards something that they don't quite understand. They're having to walk towards something that they don't get. And as they see Jesus talking to this Jewish woman and all of these questions, you can imagine that their facial expression is changing. I need you to get that moment, that their facial expression is giving away that they're shocked and that they're surprised that their Jewish rabbi is talking to this Samaritan woman, someone who doesn't look like them, someone who doesn't talk like them, someone that they have been taught growing up since they were kids, that these are people that you avoid. And yet here is Jesus being compassionate and loving and sitting down and showing empathy towards this woman. They don't get it. Now, wow, imagine that and see their facial expression. And while they're doing that, Jesus is looking at this woman and explaining to her that I am the Messiah, that I am the one. And she's coming to realize that. But if Jesus is standing in front of her, you got to know that right over the shoulder of Jesus are these 12 boys with these 12 faces of shocked and surprise and like, man, what is going on? And what has been debated for years is, why did this woman leave her jar? And some would say it's because she came there for water, and once she met Jesus, she was no longer thirsty. Okay. But what if, just indulge me for a second, what if the reason why she left her jar is because while she was willing to accept that Jesus is the Messiah, as she looked over his shoulder and saw the faces of those 12 boys, that said something different. And she left in fear. She left scared, as to say that I accept that you are the Messiah. I accept the fact that you are Jesus. But as I look at you and as I look at the people that follow you, I can still see that some things have not changed. What if she was saying, I accept that you are you, Jesus, you are the Messiah, but I'm afraid of your followers? What if this message was showing us in this particular moment that it's possible for you to follow Jesus and still not come to grips with the people that he's serving? and still not come to see people equally, and still not come to see people as connected in unity. And what if it's possible to love Jesus, be afraid of the people who follow him? This is why I'm saying it's our job as a church. And I'm talking about the capital C church, to speak up in these moments and to call this stuff wrong, to call this stuff and call it out and say, listen, no, this is a sin issue. It's a heart issue, and things have to change. Look at verse 31. Meanwhile, his disciples urged him, Rabbi, eat something. But he said to him, I have food to eat that you know nothing about. Then his disciples said to each other, could someone have brought him food? 34, my food, said Jesus, to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Jesus is getting angry. 35, don't you have a saying, it's still 4 months until harvest? I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields. It's ripe for harvest. And so here's what happens. It's almost like a Snicker commercial, right? Because they see Jesus talking to this woman, and they're like, yo, what is going on? They send us some food. And they say, Jesus, would you get something to eat? You know, the Snicker commercial, when you're hungry, you're not yourself. And so Peter's like, look, you got us in Samaria. You talking to these women out here. Like, what the world is going on, Jesus? And Jesus responds, no, my food is to do the will of the Father. As to say, I know I sent you for food, but that wasn't the mission. The mission was for you to immerse yourself in a culture that didn't look like you. The mission was for you to experience what you've been giving to them this entire time. And my food is to do the will of God. And what you just saw and what you just experienced was what God wanted. He does not want us just hanging out with people who look like us. He doesn't just want us being able to understand one side of the coin. It's important for us to merge together. And you might not get it now, but one day you will, because I'm calling you to this very nation. And you have to know what it's like. What do you mean he's calling us to his nation? I love it. Look at Acts 1, chapter number 8. It says, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem and all of Judea and Samaria. You see, Jesus was talking to a primarily Jewish audience. And when he's talking to this Jewish audience, he's telling them, hey, that place Samaria that you try to avoid, yeah, I need you to go back there. That place Samaria that you've been taught to not intermingle with and not to hang out with, no. That's actually where I'm calling you to go. So this 3.5 years that I've been with you wasn't just about you. It's about others. And so again, here's the question today. What have you been avoiding? Church, I don't believe we're in the season where we're supposed to be avoiding what's painful. I think it's time for us to address the things that we would otherwise avoid. So what is that for you? And I'm not saying that you have to handle it the way everyone else is. But what I am saying is that you need to be seeking God's face on how you will address it. This message just isn't about racism, but it's in here. And this is where our nation is. This is where the church is. This is where the globe is. What are you going to do about it? What's your part? What do you play? But let's just not just make it about racism. Let's also think about your life in general. What have you been avoiding? Some of you have been avoiding the issues of lust in your heart. And at some point, you got to say, you know what? Enough is enough. I keep doing the same things over and over and over again. I'm going to change. Some of you all, at some point, you got to say, you know, I got to get these finances together. I got to get to the place where I'm trusting God. I'm going to start tithing. I'm going to start spending less than what I make. I'm going to start saving more than I spend. I'm going to get these financial things together. But there's a group of us who absolutely have to, and I mean this, we have to look at what are the deep, personal, internal conflicts within ourselves and say, you know what? I got to look at this person in the mirror. And I got to address some things within me. I got to address some issues within me. I got to get it together. What have you been avoiding? And so this week, I'm going to challenge you to address the areas of your life that you have been afraid to go. I want to challenge you, if you're someone who has maybe struggled with this whole climate that we're in our country. I'm going to challenge you to look at, what have I been avoiding about this? And begin to speak up and speak out against it, or even correct some of the things that may be within me. Because sometimes the what is a who. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this message. I know it could have been challenging. I know it could have been difficult to hear. But the truth is, we all have stuff that we've been avoiding, and we got to speak up on it. We got to speak out against it, or we got to correct it inside of us. And I pray that you will go on a journey this week and really figure out what that is. Can I pray for you? God, we just thank you so much for being so good. Thank you for being so awesome and so amazing. God, we love you. We appreciate you. Father, help us to face pain head on. Help us to address what we've been avoiding and come to you. Hey, I just want to do one more prayer for you, in this simple one. I want you to receive Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. If you do that today, it's super simple. We tried our best to make this as easy as sending a text, and I mean it. So just repeat these words after me. Say, God, today, I give you my life. I believe in my heart and confess with my mouth that you are Lord. Have you said that? Just text ENGAGE to 94000. It's right at the bottom of the screen. We can't wait to celebrate with you. It's going to be amazing. And we'll see you next week for a brand new sermon series called Me and Mine. Hey, we really hope that this message today started some wonderful conversations, not only in your head, but in your family and in your communities today. That would just be my heart. Again, remember the question this week is, what have you been avoiding? And the what just may be the who. Hey, this is our time where we have the opportunity to give and continue to partner with this ministry. Before we do this, can I just read you a Bible verse really quick? It's 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6-8. It says, remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. And whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each of you should give what you have decided in your own heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. Hey man, I'm praying today that as you consider giving and partnering with our ministry today, that you'll do it generously, that you'll say, man, what is the gift that God has put on my heart to give that might be uncomfortable, but I'm going to trust God in it. Would you do that today? Would you give generously? Here's what we know, that we cannot outgive God. And whatever we give, we know God will give back to us, pressed down, shaken together, runneth over a good measure. I remember that song, Giving to Be Given to You. Some of y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. Hey, we appreciate all of your giving to our church. We understand that for some of you all, it is a sacrifice, especially in these times. We just want to let you know we appreciate it, and we hope to see that you are sowing into good ground. We love you. We appreciate you. Text the number at the bottom of the screen, and we can't wait to see you next week for a brand new sermon series called Me and Mine. Don't forget to text REGATHER to 94000. Love you. See you soon.